Well, I have, as I mentioned, decided to kind of do a split. We were doing live, I just saw you in person. But because this way you can kind of watch the videos and rewatch them and go back and kind of look at them, and it's not just the one time you hear it, you can keep on hearing it again. We did a little bit in person. I told you we were talking about right triangles. That's our chapter. It's called Right Triangle Trig. And so we're going to do a few things here with right triangles and making sure we know how to figure out that stuff. Again, all of this stuff, you should have notes out. You should be writing down notes, taking notes on everything I'm talking about, drawing pictures that I have drawn. There's a lot of papers that I already have pre-written on and pre-done, but remember you can hit pause and copy that down into your notes. I am waiting in the Google Meet, as I mentioned. I'm waiting there for emails or you Google Hangout with me to say, hey, Miss Jabs, I'm at this point of the video and I'm confused. Can you help me out? So just to make sure that you are on track. So there are three major words, actually sort of six major words we need to learn today. A couple of them I've already mentioned to you, but one of the words is the word hypotenuse. Okay, so go ahead and copy this down. We're about to define it. But remember, since we're talking about right triangles, this word only shows up in right triangle. Previously, when we talked about triangles, I was like, hey, what are the three lengths of the sides? And I didn't really care what the sides were called. When we get to a right triangle, there are three very important words that we need to know, and hypotenuse is one of them. Let me make sure that I write this. So that I write it first and then I show it to you guys. Sorry, I know if I was in class, I'd be doing the same thing. So hypotenuse is opposite the right angle. So it's one of the legs. Like I mentioned, these three words that I'm about to show you, hypotenuse is the first of our three words. Hypotenuse is one of our legs. It is the leg that is opposite the right angle. Now, if every time we were doing this, I would say hypotenuse, hypotenuse, you better believe I always say the word hypotenuse, but I am going to, in an orange highlighter, highlight the letters HYP. I use the letters HYP a lot to represent the word hypotenuse. It's just a lot shorter to write, a lot easier, but we should all know that HYP stands for hypotenuse, and that is the leg that is opposite of the right angle. Now, there are two more words I would like you to define in just a minute, and so I'd like you to skip like 2 to 4 blue lines in your notebook. But underneath that, I need you to draw two triangles that look exactly the same. If they look exactly the same as mine, I don't really care, but remember, it has to be a right triangle. So I would use like your blue line and your red line to help you get a right triangle. But if you could get a right triangle, and of course, make sure to label angle A, please make sure it's the same angle that I have. Angle A as the right angle. Remember, you're making two of these in your notes. So this first word, I'm still going to be using my black marker right now to write this. I am going to go to my right angle, whether I use my finger or my pencil, either one. That's the way I like to always have kids do it the first time. And then you're on this angle right here. Go across the triangle from it, right down here. This is the leg between C and B. And remember, we were on angle A. And if we go across from it, we're now on CB. Notice neither of those letters is letter A. CB is the leg that is opposite that angle. And so we're going to write the word hypotenuse. Remember, we shortcut that and rewrite HYP. You can do that on both triangles. So right now, we should have an HYP on two triangles, whether you have them drawn like this in your notebook, whether you have them drawn right next to each other, and things like that, okay? Now, if we were in class, I would call on two different people in the room and say, hey, who is sitting next to you? Now, considering who I call on, they say the person who is sitting next to them is somebody different. And that's very much the same about the next two words I would like you to define. One of them is a word we've already said today, and it's a word we say a lot. Another is a word you've maybe heard mentioned before, but you don't say it a lot. So go ahead. This is above your triangles. This is below the word hypotenuse where you left a little bit of room. Go ahead and write these two words down. Opposite, adjacent. Those are the other two words we need to define. And I know that sounds kind of funny. Opposite is a very easy word. My fault. Opposite is a very easy word to define. Opposite means across from. We've already done that. And again, sorry, since I'm talking and writing, sometimes I get a little bit discombobulated. Since we're talking about an angle, opposite from a specific angle. So again, if I would just say, what's opposite? You need to know opposite of what? Like, what's opposite of up? Well, then you can answer, what is opposite of up? But if I just say, what's opposite? You're like, I don't know. You need to know what it is opposite of. So that's why we have two triangles drawn here. In just a minute, I'm going to get back to those. So opposite, you're going to go from an angle and you're going to go across or opposite of it. Adjacent. Has anybody here ever heard the word adjacent before? There might be some situations or times where you've heard it, but the word adjacent means next to. And so opposite we go across from, but adjacent we go next to. Now, when I draw on my triangles in just a minute right here, adjacent can get a little bit tricky because there's always two things next to an angle. But the important thing is one of the words is the most important word in a right triangle. The most important word, the word that has the most importance, is the word hypotenuse. That's why I already wrote that on my triangles in black, because no matter what angle you are looking at, the hypotenuse always has to be opposite of the right angle. And so we already have that drawn in, okay? So opposite. Now, again, I'm gonna put a box around the letters OPP and a box around the letters ADJ, because those are words that are gonna be important to us, but that's how I'm gonna refer to them quite a bit. So we have HYP for hypotenuse, OPP for opposite, ADJ for adjacent. Now, I already sort of mentioned this. If I was in the room and I called on a specific student and I said, who is next to you? Who is opposite of you? Different people will answer different ways. So I'm going to use this pinkish colored pen. Hopefully it shows up okay. And I would like you to pretend you're the important student and your name is Betsy. And so we're going to put a box around the B. Would you please put a box on one of your two triangles? It does not matter which one. Would you please put a box around your B? Now remember, we have already the very, very first thing I would always recommend labeling is the hypotenuse. So that's why I already have that written in the black pen, because that's important. It doesn't even matter that we're looking at B. A is the right angle, go opposite of it, that's the hypotenuse. Promise, no matter what, all the time, hypotenuse. So we would write HYP there, no matter what. But now I've circled angle B in pink. So would you please put your pencil on angle B, and would you go to the leg that is opposite of it? That's right over here. So right now I'm going to write opposite. Remember, I'm just using OPP on that leg, because if we look at that, that goes across from B. Now I know my words are kind of opposite, like twisted from what the letters are, and sorry, it's not showing up the greatest maybe, but according to B, this would be opposite. And then what's next to it? Now here's the funny thing. The adjacent leg is the leg that's next to it, but hypotenuse is always also next to B. But since it's the hypotenuse, we don't give it another word. We just leave it as hypotenuse only. So the only other leg that would be next to B is this leg right here across the top. So next to, remember, is our like low key word to remember, but adjacent is what we want to do. So would you agree that with angle B, and this would be a point where you would pause your video and say, hey, Miss Jabs, I'm not understanding, all right? But according to my pink angle, this would get the word opposite. This would get the word adjacent. So if we look at this triangle, because I circled B, according to student angle B, those are the words I would put on this triangle. But you know what? Student B is not the only student in the class. That's why I had you pick and draw two triangles that were exactly the same. Because angle A is the right angle, that student is always the right person, we're never going to pick the right angle. So we're not going to pick A. We already picked B. So let me see what other color pen I have right here. It's like a light bluish color pen. We are going to circle student C, angle C. Okay, angle C I circled in that light blue color. And so same thing, we need to now define these legs according to angle C. So if we put our finger here and I wanted to go opposite of this, remember I kind of just go across the triangle like that, and up here would be opposite. And you're like, but Miss Jabs, 2 seconds ago when we were doing the other triangle in pink, the same triangle, but just like I wrote a different word there. You did. You have to be very careful about how you label things and what you label things, because right now we're saying C is the most important. We're saying C is what we're comparing to. I called on a different student this time, so somebody else is sitting up opposite of them and somebody else is sitting next to them. So remember, next to is actually the letters, the word adjacent. And so we would do ADJ right there. So ladies and gentlemen, this is why you have to be very careful when you're working with the triangle. We have two triangles right here. Same triangle. If I hold it up kind of behind the light, you can see they match up. You can see that permanent marker going through there, they match up. But if I call on student B, the one I wrote in pink, this long one across the top is what we would call adjacent, and the one that goes up and down is what we would call opposite. But if I call on a different student in the room, if I call or look at a different angle, the long one across the top is opposite, and the one that's going up and down is adjacent. All right, so we have to be very careful. And again, right now, if you're getting very, very confused, number one, rewind and watch the video again. Number two, pause and come and talk to me and say, hey, Miss Jabs, I'm really confused. Can you help me out? If you're doing okay so far, great. We need to do 3 new words. And I'd like you to write them out very quickly right next to each other. I'm spacing them out by lines, but you don't need to. These are the full spelling of the words, okay? And I've mentioned them already today. Sine, S-I-N-E, but it is pronounced like S-I-G-N, sine. Cosine, and then tangent. And tangent does get a little bit confusing because earlier this year we did talk about that tangent line, which was a perpendicular line, which is why it comes up and is important again. And once again, when we were together in class, I know I had us work on a little bit on Desmos and stuff like that. Same thing, we use only 3 letters for each of these. So in a second, I'm about to hold up a paper that says sine, but it only says S-I-N. Please do not say the word sin. When we write S-I-N in math class, it means sine. So please say sine. C-O-S stands for cosine, and T-A-N stands for tangent. And so we're about to get some, and your homework should go pretty quick and easy after we do this. The first one, I wrote the full ratio out. After that, I just started writing the shortcut. So this is a very interesting letter. I'll talk about it in a minute, but go ahead and hit pause and write either the top one or the bottom one. I usually write the bottom one. This is saying sine. This thing right here is a Greek letter. Do you guys remember when we had that assembly near the end of February and those people were there and they were saying like, oh, I belong to this sorority, or, you know, just different things like that. They use Greek letters to represent what they're a member of. And this is, it looks like a circle with a line through the middle. A lot of people will say it looks like an Easter egg and stuff like that. It is the Greek letter theta. Again, it's kind of a fun little side thing. If you want to pause real quick, go to Google and just Google search the Greek alphabet. You see a lot of those letters, symbols that they had, that they were talking about that. But theta is T-H-E-T-A, theta. is how it's pronounced. There's few less letters in the Greek alphabet, by the way, random fact. But sine of theta would equal the opposite leg divided by the hypotenuse. It's a ratio. We're going to leave it as a ratio, leave it as a fraction. Do not write it as a decimal. Please leave it as a fraction. Always reduce your fractions as well. So sine of theta, we got to figure out what leg is our opposite leg, what leg is our hypotenuse, and then we would just write a ratio of them. So sine of theta is opposite over hypotenuse. You can pause if you need to. But cosine of theta would be adjacent over hypotenuse. And one more, tangent of theta is opposite over adjacent. And so something like, as you're working on this, and maybe a parent is listening in the background and they're like, this sounds really familiar to me. Lots of times when I tell people that I teach high school math, they're like, I remember only a few things from high school math. One of them is SOHCAHTOA. And so if you would write this down, and I'm going to show you in just a quick second where this comes from, but it's a SOHCAHTOA. And lots of times on Thursday, you're going to hear me saying this a lot again. What one should we use? Should we use so? Should we use ka? Should we use toa? So again, if you want to, you may go back in your notes and do this. But remember how I said sine is opposite and hypotenuse? SOHCAHTOA is just a thing to help us remember what goes together. By saying so, and I usually say it weird like that, it reminds us that so is SOH for that ratio. Ka is that ratio of cosine C adjacent A hypotenuse H, and TOA, again, tangent T, opposite and adjacent. So SOHCAHTOA helps us out, remember that. All right, so we're about to do 3 examples. And I'm going to do one example of each. The triangles are kind of twisted and mixed around. And then hopefully you'll be able to go to the homework and look at the homework and be able to do it real quick. If not, remember, I'm there. By the way, when you're done watching this video, I expect you to check back in on the Google Meet and just be like, hey, Miss Jabs, made sense. I'm getting it. I'm working on the homework right now. You can be on Google Meet and have your microphone on mute and be working on your homework and just click unmute and say, hey, Miss Jabs, I got a question on number 8. I don't even know. But you always have to be careful. And remember, are we worried about the blue angle or the pink angle? You got to be careful about what angle we're looking at. And the problem tells you by what letter shows up. Please remember, go ahead and copy this down. This is an example number 1. Copy down this whole thing, letters, numbers, and all. Remember, we have 3 angles, X, Y, and Z. X, Y, and Z. Now, before I even should have put this on here, I should have asked you guys, what leg is the hypotenuse? You should automatically, when you see a right triangle, be able to know where the hypotenuse. Boom, that fast. If you can't find the hypotenuse that fast, you're going to be in trouble. So Y is our right angle. Go across from it. So I am going to use the permanent marker this time, just so it's nice and clear on all of them. I'm going to write HYP next to the number 5 because we want to cross from the right angle, and that's the hypotenuse. All right? Now, the next thing you need to do in every problem is look at the problem to figure out what is my important angle. My important angle this time is Z. Last time I said, what if I called on student Betsy? So I circled B. This is saying in this triangle, for whatever reason, this example, I wanted Z to be the most important angle. So go ahead and circle Z. Since we've circled Z, we now need to know what is opposite Z. You're right. If you go across the triangle from Z, 4 is opposite, and that would make 3 adjacent. Guys, as you're getting started here, I would honestly think about labeling every single leg in every single triangle, just so you get used to that, okay? So we have opposite, we have adjacent, we're ready to go. Now, if we pull back up and think about SOH, S-O-H, SO stands for, thank you, opposite over hypotenuse. So let's look at our triangle again. What did we label? What one of our legs says opposite next to it? 4. Thank you. 4 is our opposite, and our hypotenuse is 5. Now, of course, we're in math class. If we write a fraction, we should make sure that it is the most reduced fraction. Can you reduce 4 over 5? All right. Then our answer for example number 1 would be 4 over 5. We could read that as 4/5. Okay? So that was an example of sign. Example 1 was an example of sign. Here we go. I drew the triangle in a different way, so we would have to look at it a little bit different. Go ahead and hit pause so you can copy this down. And again, before you even care what angle you're looking at, go ahead and your right angle is here. Immediately go across from it. And so I'm going to write that is opposite. So I'm going to write HYP. Sorry, I was looking at cosine and already thinking in my head what words. So go to your right angle, go opposite of it. That is the hypotenuse. I know that gets confusing because I say go opposite of it, but remember, since it's the right angle, opposite is hypotenuse. Now, what angle are we looking at? Angle Q, thank you. So circle angle Q. I'm going to do it the other way this time. Go right next to it. What's right next to angle Q? 32, okay, so that would make 32 adjacent. Look at angle Q again and go opposite of it, go across from it, and so 60 would be opposite. Now, we need to be worried about our SOHCAHTOA again. What does cosine write as the ratio? Adjacent over hypotenuse. All right, so let's look at angle Q again on this triangle. We've labeled them. Cosine of Q should be adjacent, which is 32. Sorry, I'm going to write it below my thing just because I know I need a little bit more space. Adjacent was 32, and hypotenuse is 68. But what would you like to tell me about 32 and 68? They're both even. They're actually both divisible by 4. So if you would do 32 divided by 4, you get 8. 68 divided by 4 is 17. Now, if you didn't know that, you could have reduced by 2, but always reduce and make it as low as you can. So 8 over 17 cannot be reduced anymore. So our answer for example 2 would be 8 over 17. All right, just to make sure we kind of know what's going on and we would have an example of each, I have one more triangle. Again, it's kind of drawn in an interesting way. But angle B is the right angle, so go opposite of it. Let me make sure I write it right this time. Opposite of the right angle is our hypotenuse. What is our most important angle that our problem is asking us about? Thank you, angle C. So I'm going to circle angle C, go across the triangle from it. So 10 would be opposite. Go next to it. Remember, don't pick the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is next to C, but we've already labeled that. So next to it is 24. That would be adjacent. And again, thinking of SOHCAHTOA, tangent should be opposite over adjacent. What did you label as opposite? 10. What did you label as adjacent? 24. Those both happen to be even. So let's reduce. 5 over 12. Can't reduce anymore. Your answer for the tangent of tangent of C would be 5 over 12. And guys, that's what your homework is going to look like. Sorry, I know this lecture was a little bit longer, but I'm telling you, this stuff is very, very important. Your homework should be posted. Your homework is due by the end of our block period. But because of how long this lecture was, I did kind of make the homework a little bit shorter, and it is multiple choice. So if you would like to submit it, it's helpful to draw the pictures out and do stuff like that. If you do it on paper and want to take a picture and submit your picture by email or on Classroom, if you just want to do the work and do it as a Google Doc and say the answer to number 1 is A, the answer to number 2 is A, the answer to number 3 is A. Guys, I don't really know if those are the answers, so don't do that. But again, I am available on the Google Meet still. Actually, you need to stop this video and go back to the Google Meet and say, hey, Miss Jabs, I think I'm on track. I think I'm okay. I'm working on my homework now. Your homework is due at the end of our block period. Thanks and have a great day.